Hey everybody, and welcome back. Today we're going to talk a little bit about geologic processes. So what is a geologic process? Well, it's something that happens because of nature, it's not human-made, and it shapes the landscape around it, shapes the geology of a region. So what are some examples? Well, a really long-term geologic process would be plate tectonics. We've been talking about that recently. So it's something that really shapes the continents and shapes where they are. And it's happening continuously and it doesn't really stop. So that's a really long-term geologic process, plate tectonics. Now, an example of a short-term geologic process would be, say, a mudslide or a landslide. Something that happens quickly, but it can really change what a region looks like, or the geology of a particular space. So we are going to head outside today. We're going to go to Discovery Park, and we're going to look at the cliffs there and see what we can deduce, see what we can figure out about how those cliffs formed and what we can learn just really by looking at them. So I will see you there. Let's go. We're here today at Discovery Park in Seattle, which is an excellent place to see all sorts of examples of weathering and erosion and deposition and lots of geological things that we will hopefully find. So let's venture into the park and see what we can see. We're here at the top of the cliffs at Discovery Park. We're going to head down to that beach down there so we can look up and see all of the layers of the cliffs and talk about how they got there, how long they've been there, and that kind of stuff. We're down most of the cliff now, and from this angle you can really see the islands kind of sticking out of the Puget Sound. And so one thing to keep in mind during this video is that this region between 15 and 20,000 years ago was covered in glaciers, and glaciers are actually what carved out the Puget Sound. So if we were to take the Space Needle, which is about 600 feet tall, just over 600 feet tall, and put another Space Needle on top of it, that's about the depth of the ice that was present during those times. About 1,000 feet, a little bit more in some places. So you can just imagine we would be totally underneath 1,000 feet of ice if we were standing here between 15 and 20,000 years ago. We have now made it down to the beach, and so what we're going to look at today is back up at these cliffs. And so if you look over there, right in the center there, you can see there are a bunch of layers of different colors of rock, and so we're going to go over there and talk a little bit about how those were laid down and what this can tell us. So we can really clearly see those layers of different rocks of sediment laid down here. And if we look up, we can even see some up there. But down here, it's really clear. So let's go take a closer look. One really cool thing about looking at layers like these is that we can sort of go back in time. So all of these layers down here, these are about 20,000 to 60,000 years old. And they were deposited here when this whole area was a big floodplain. So it was really flat and it would flood as water would come in and out, and there would be lots of lakes. So each of these layers was a different sort of sediment that would settle out of the lake or the flood that was happening, and then would create these layers over time. Now right above this is a very different color, as you can see. It's sort of more of a mud or a silt. And this was created during that last ice age between 15 and 20,000 years ago. And up near Canada, at the Strait of Juan de Fuca, there was a glacier that sort of clogged that area from the water going in and out. So a huge lake was formed all over this region. And so this was deposited then. So same sort of process. There was sediment in the water, and over time it would sink to the bottom and create these layers. So the lowest layers here are the oldest, and then as we get further and further up, it becomes younger and younger, or more recent. So the next layer up, which is sort of the thickest, so we have the lower layer and sort of the second layer. The next layer up was created when there was a glacier here, but part of it was melting, so there would be streams underneath the glacier that would take some of the larger rocks away and sort of just leave them here as they were flowing away. So this layer is made up of particles and sort of sand, that the particles are larger than they are in this layer here, where it's more kind of mud. But up here is sand, and then on top of that, which we can't see from here, is even larger rocks like boulders. And those were left when the glaciers were actually receding. They were going back sort of to the north, and they left behind larger rocks that they had brought down here, or picked up along the way as they were coming down here. Here's a really great view of those layers, and then the next layers up. You can see sort of a brownish layer, and then a lighter layer above that, and then again above even that, where we can't see, would be the top layer, the most recent layer, which would contain larger stones and even some boulders and things like that. So from out here you can really see those layers in the cliffside. You can see the oldest layers at the bottom, between 20 and 60,000 years old. And then sort of midway up, you can see the second oldest layer, which is about 15 to 20,000 years old. And then above that, it gets even younger. So that's what I meant about sort of being able to look back in time. You can see what sediments were placed there at different points in time, and kind of figure out what was going on then. All right, that was nice to get outside for a little bit. So one of the most important big concepts that we saw at Discovery Park in those cliffs was that the lower down something is in the cliff, the older it is, right? So that lowest level was between 20 and 60,000 years old. And then right above that was between 15 and 20,000 years, and then younger and younger as we got up the cliff. So what are some things in our daily lives that could sort of illustrate this topic? Well, if you look at your pile of dirty laundry, maybe, or your pile of toys on the floor in your room that you haven't cleaned up lately, right? The ones at the bottom of the pile are the clothes that you wore maybe a week ago or a month ago. And the ones at the top of the pile are the ones that you wore yesterday. Or the toys at the bottom of the pile, maybe you haven't seen them in a while, but the toys at the top of the pile on the floor are ones that you saw maybe just yesterday. So this can be applied in all sorts of things, and it really can be applied in a lot of things that you see outside in nature. So next time you see a cliff, when you're out for a hike or walking around on the beach, you can tell whoever you're with that you know that the lower down in the cliff, the older that stuff is. So I hope you enjoyed that little trek to Discovery Park, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.